everyone, this is Lecture 8 on Chapter 15, the final lecture for the course, and one of my favorite lectures and chapters, Population, Urbanization, and Environment, as I'm both an urban and environmental sociologist and actually teach both of those classes here at Troy. Learning objectives for this lecture and chapter: explain the concepts of fertility, mortality, and migration and how they affect population size. Analyze population trends using Malthusian theory and demographic transition theory. Summarize patterns of urbanization in the United States and around the world. Identify the contributions of Ferdinand Tönnies, Emil Durkheim, Max Weber, and Karl Marx, the four gentlemen at the bottom, and to our understanding of urban life. Describe the third urban revolution now underway in poor societies. Analyze current environmental problems such as pollution and global warming, and evaluate the progress toward creating an ecologically sustainable culture. So we've got a lot to cover. 3 broad subjects within one chapter. Demography is the study of population. From 250,000 years ago until just 250 years ago, human population hovered around 500 million. But world population began to spike during the mid 18th century or 1750. The world population today, I just checked at www.census.gov, is about 7.39 billion. 80-some million people are added to the world annually, and the United States population is just under 325 million. It should hit that number by the end of this year. The two population clocks that I use, the World Population Clock and the USA Population Clock, are both available at www.census.gov. It's a great website for information. I also want to let you know that we do have a demography course here at Troy in the Sociology Department, SOC 4411, Population and Society. In old catalogs, it used to be listed as demography, but people apparently didn't know what demography was, so we've recently changed the name. So if you're interested in demography and the study of populations, how it can change, what are the signs that let you know that something's wrong with your society because of the changes in population size, maybe think about taking SOC 4411, Population and Society. Fertility is the incidence of childbearing in a society's population. And usually when we talk about issues of fertility, we talk about who? Well, we're talking about women, as those are the part of the human race that can actually do the childbearing. Fecundity is maximum possible childbearing. So fecundity, factor of fecundity is based upon women's fertility, as well as the number of years for optimal childbearing. And then also you have to take into consideration cultural things. In some cultures, women start having children very early, even when what we here in the West would consider them to still be children. Here in the West, we starting to have children later and later as women are choosing, for many reasons, to hold off childbirth. A lot of women are pursuing education, like a number of you are. A lot of women want to make sure that they're establishing a career, and a lot of women they're doing a lot more thinking in terms of how they want their lives to be and how they want the lives of their children to be before bringing them into the world. There are a number of rates that we look at when we talk about population size. The crude birth rate is basically the number of live births in a given year for every 1,000 people. So we take live births in a year, divided by the total population, and then multiply that by 1,000. The crude birth rate is referred to as the crude birth rate because it looks at total population, but as I said in the earlier slide, it's not the total population that's able to have children, it's only the women. The crude death rate is the number of deaths in a year for every 1,000 people. So it's deaths in a year divided by the total population times 1,000. I don't know why the crude death rate is called crude, but the crude birth rate is called crude because it's based upon total population, even though we know a total population can't have children. Even when we look at just women, we know that all of them cannot have children. Infant mortality rate is important as well, which is the number of deaths among infants under 1 for 1,000 live births in a year. Infant mortality rates is one of the ways that we compare health outcomes across countries. Those countries with high infant mortality rates are usually poorer and have poor public health or healthcare systems. And those places with very, very low infant mortality rates are richer countries with very excellent healthcare systems. So infant mortality rate serves as an excellent way to compare healthcare systems across countries or between countries. You calculate infant mortality rates by taking the death of children under 1 year of age divided by the number of live births times 1,000. Life expectancy is another rate that we use to look at a country's health, as those countries that have longer or higher life expectancies are the countries that are considered to be healthier. The life expectancy is basically the average lifespan of a country's population. Over time, as countries get wealthier, their life expectancies increase. Population is also affected by migration, which is the movement into and out of a specified territory. There's voluntary migration when people move from one area to another in pursuit of a new job. And there's also involuntary migration when people are forced due to war. Social conditions are terrible and unsafe, so people say, I need to get my family and myself out of here. There are other social conflicts. Sometimes there can be quote-unquote ethnic cleansing, which can include genocide, as well as forcing people who are different than the majority population to leave a particular territory. So immigration is movement into a territory. Emigration is movement out of a territory. So when you see the I at the start of immigration, just think into. When you see the E in front of emigration, think of exit. The rates that we calculate when we look at migration are the in-migration rate, the out-migration rate, and the net migration rate, because the net migration rate will actually tell you how many people have either been added to your population or subtracted from your population. Fertility, mortality, and migration all affect the size of the population, and we can also estimate a population's growth. You can divide a society's population growth rate into the number 70, and this yields a doubling time in years. For instance, if we have a population of 1 million, we want to know, let's not use 1 million. Let's use, let's use 1 million. If we use 1 million, we want to know how many years it's going to take a population to double, and that population's been growing at 10% a year. We know that that population will reach 2 million in 7 years. So it's 70 divided by 10% equals 7. So the doubling time in years is 7 years if you have a population that's growing at about 10% a year, which is ridiculously fast. Sex ratio is the number of males for every 100 females in a nation's population. And the sex ratio for most countries is always less than 100, as women tend to outlive men for various reasons. They don't take the same number of risks that men do. They usually choose less stressful occupations. So usually the sex ratio of men to women is going to be less than 100. The age-sex pyramid, or the also known as population pyramid. This book is the first time I've ever seen population pyramids referred to as age-sex pyramids. So I'm just letting you know, in the future, if somebody uses either term, this is what they're talking about, which is a graphic representation of the age and sex of a population. On this slide, you can see there are 4 population pyramids for the years 2000, 2010, and there are also 2 forecasted population pyramids, 2020 and 2030. The upper left-hand corner, that's the year 2000 population pyramid for the state of Alabama, which was also downloaded from www.census.gov. You can see the blue side on the left represents males, and the yellow side on the right represents females. On the y-axis, you have age cohorts. The youngest age cohort is 0 to 4 years. The oldest age cohort is 85 plus years. At the top of the pyramid, you can see all of these aren't very stereotypical pyramid shapes. Anyway, on the x-axis, you can see the percentage of total population of each cohort, and you can see that axis has 0 at the middle and then increases in 1 percentage point increments for both the male side and the female side. As you can see from that 2000 pyramid, there's a sort of a bump at the top of the pyramid starting at the 35 to 39 age cohort, going up to the 35 to 39 cohort, going up to the 50 to 54 cohort. Most of you know that, of course, is the baby boom. As we move to the year 2010 population pyramid, we can see that the baby boom has moved up higher into the 45 to 49 cohort to the 60 to 64 cohort, in that the age cohorts below the baby boom have kind of started to even out. We go down to the 2020 population pyramid in the lower left-hand corner. We can see it's not very pyramid-y shaped at all, except at the very top. And then once again in 2030, the age cohorts are sort of evened out, except for the very top. Another thing to keep in mind, if you look at the 85 plus age cohort on the top of these pyramids, you can see that the female side is longer than the male side, and that is because women tend to live longer than men. Thomas Robert Malthus is a famous political economist from England, who once predicted that the population increase in the world would lead to social chaos, as he believed that people would reproduce at rates exceeding the world's ability to produce sufficient food. So Malthus believed that population would increase at an exponential rate, whereas our ability to produce food would only increase at a direct rate or linear rate. Fortunately, he was wrong. A critique of the Malthusian theory of population was that it was flawed, didn't include artificial birth control, which Malthus said was morally wrong anyway, or abstinence, people just not engaging in sex at all, which he thought was unlikely. And then he also forgot to speak about the role of social inequality. There's an abundance of food in the world, but unfortunately we still have famines and other natural disasters in the world. And then there's political reasons as well as to why some people in the world don't have enough food. There's plenty of food for everybody in the world, but because of political conflict, it can be difficult to get people whose own countries are temporarily unable to produce enough food. For political reasons, we sometimes don't get them the food that they need. Demographic transition theory is something else that's also covered in demography, or the study of population, which links population patterns to a society's level of technological development. In stage 1, which is considered the pre-industrial or agrarian stage, there are high birth rates due to the economic value of children. Just think, if you were a farmer back in those days, or a hunter-gatherer society, the more children that you have, the more people that you have who are actually engaging in farming or in hunting or in gathering, in terms of providing food for the whole society. And there's also a lack of birth control back in the oldie-timey days. In stage 2, or the early industrial phase, there's a high birth rate still, but there's a lower death rate, which boosts population growth. It's during this period that we got better public health, so people didn't die from germs and diseases as much as in the past. And also, we got better at farming and animal husbandry, so it became easier to feed large numbers of people. In stage 3, which is the mature industrial stage, there's population growth has stopped as affluence transfers children into economic liability. In the past, before we had children's labor laws in the Western world, children were able to go off to work. So if you were a household with a number of children, you could send off your kids to work, they could make money and bring that money back in. But now, because of child labor laws and because of compulsory education, households can't send their kids off to work. Households have to send their kids off to school, but those households are also still responsible for providing those children with shelter and with food. Then the stage 4, or the post-industrial stage, which a number of countries are in right now, economic realities force a drop in birth rates. We have a drop in birth rates because women are taking a lot of their, more and more of their fertile years to work or to go to college, as opposed to using those years to just have children. It's expensive to have kids, not just to raise them to be 18, but then to pay for college, for other reasons. So countries that are considered to be in post-industrial stage include Japan. Japan is considered the aging laboratory of the world because in terms of the rich Western economies that are capitalistic and democratic, Japan has the population with the oldest average age. Japan, Germany, Italy, countries like that are post-industrial, serious drop in birth rates. And they're not even having enough children to replace the people who are dying in those countries. This is a chart or a graphic showing the demographic transition model. There are three, and let's take a look at that top graph. There are 3 lines to consider. The green line is the birth rate. The red line is the death rate. As you can see in stage 1, they're both very high. The black line is total population. As we move from stage 1 to stage 2, population begins to grow as the death rate drops. Death rate drops because there's better public health, there's better sewage infrastructure, so we're not getting killed by our own waste. And the birth rate is still high. In stage 3, the death rate is still low. The birth rate begins to drop because kids are no longer an economic asset, they're economic liability, but the population is still growing. In stage 4, the population is large, but it's starting to stabilize as both death rates and the birth rate have stabilized. And then stage 5, the population starts to decline because the birth rate is not high enough to replace the people who are old and dying. If you go down to the second chart, or second graph on the same slide, we can see how the population pyramids hypothetical population pyramids would look in the various stages. So if you look at in the fourth stage, the UK population pyramid post 1950, that's pretty similar to what the United States as a whole looks like, and what most United States look like, especially those states in the north that aren't growing fast, like the states of Texas or Florida, which are still growing very fast. And then in terms of decline, if you go to stage 5 and look at the Russian population pyramid, you can see that at some point that population pyramid is going to be upside down. The widest part of the population pyramid will actually be at the top instead of the bottom, as the birth rate is very low, and Russian people are not having enough kids to actually replace the people who are dying. The demographic transition theory critique or evaluation includes this theory proposes a key population keys to population control lies in technology, birth control, better sewage systems, getting better at growing food in terms of growing crops and animal husbandry, growing bigger and bigger animals that we can actually eat, getting better at aquaculture, growing fish to eat as well, will have an effect on your population control. The more resources you have in your territory, the bigger your population is going to be eventually. The demographic transition theory also suggests that without the redistribution of global resources, the planet will become increasingly divided into haves and have-nots. Here in the United States, we're blessed. We have the most fresh water, we have a lot of land, we have the best agricultural scientists, so we have a lot of blessings compared to a lot of other countries in the rest of the world. Another blessing that we have in terms of population is we're a relatively open country to immigration. We talk a lot about illegal immigration in the United States, but if you legally want to come to the United States, we're pretty much for it, whereas a lot of countries like Western Europe and Japan, countries that I told you were actually in stage 5 of the demographic transition, those countries are not as open to immigrants as the quote-unquote settler societies, United States, Canada, and Australia. So Canada, Australia, and the United States actually have another resource in that those three countries, or our three countries, are very open to legal immigration. In terms of global population, we divide the world into the low growth north, where there's basically zero population growth, as the level of reproduction that maintains population is in a steady state, and eventually underpopulation might become a problem, especially if more and more young women decide to put off marriage and childbirth to an even later age within their lives. Then we have the high growth South, the African continent, Latin America. Population growth is a critical problem in several poor countries because even though their populations are growing, which is a good thing, they may not necessarily have the resources to make sure that everybody in those countries is getting everything that they need in terms of fresh water and food. Alright, so now we're going to move into a little bit of urbanization and urban sociology. Urbanization is when there's a concentration of a population or the redistribution of population from rural areas into urban areas within a society, which transforms many patterns of social life. If you have interest in urban areas, here at Troy we have a course called Urban Sociology, or SOC 4406, taught by yours truly, Professor Kevin A. Lynn. Urban sociology, like I was saying earlier, is one of the specialties of sociology that I actually enjoy teaching a lot. And I teach it from an application or practical point of view because, as I told you in the course introduction, I was used to be an urban planner, so urban issues are something that in my adult life I've always worked on or been concerned about, and I still remain concerned about them. So if you're interested in urban issues, think about taking my urban sociology class, SOC 4406. Throughout human histories, cities have evolved. The first big city was Jericho, which is north of the Dead Sea in the Middle East. And then there's some pre-industrial European cities that date back 5,000 years. The Greeks, of course, were famous for their Greek city-states, Athens and Sparta, and other places as well. And then industrial European cities began as the Middle Ages ended. People left the countryside and feudal estates in Western European countries and began to aggregate in cities because they figured out they could be treated better, they'd be able to make more money, and with more money they'd be able to buy more resources for themselves and their families. In the United States, we had colonial settlement. 1565, St. Augustine in Florida was the first city, or at least considered the first city built upon European influence. St. Augustine's a fun city to visit. But another fun city to visit is right here in Alabama. Mobile was the French capital of North America. And it still has, like St. Augustine, it still has a number of vestiges of its former European settlers. Both St. Augustine and Mobile both have old forts that old European powers actually built. So if you can't make it to St. Augustine, at least try to get down to Mobile. I also like Mobile since I'm from the Detroit area. The Detroit area was founded by Cadillac, and Cadillac actually came through Mobile before making its way north to Michigan. We had urban expansion in the 1800s as towns sprang up along transportation routes. The earliest transportation routes were rivers. People used waterways for transportation, as irrigation, as well as communication in terms of the delivering of mail. Then we had rail. Eventually you had the construction of our highway system. And towns would grow, as each of these systems expanded, towns would grow along with the expansion. In the 1860s and 1950, we had the metropolitan area as the effects of the Civil War boosted growth. We also had the rise of our metropolises, or large cities that socially and economically dominate an urban area, such as our large cities that are now over 1 million people in population. New York City, over 8 million, all the way to San Jose, California, which is just under, or about 1 million people now. Then we had urban decentralization in the 1950s as people deserted downtown areas for outlying suburbs, and for a number of reasons. We began to increase a federal highway system, not just to link cities, but to go out into the countryside to create and build new suburbs. People who lived in old cities wanted to live in places with lots of greenery and in new houses, so they moved from inner cities out to the suburbs. Cities were having lots of strife, class and race strife, so people wanted to leave suburbs to get away from that. Then we had the riots in many cities surrounding the deaths of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King in inner cities, and so a lot of people left cities to move to the suburbs because of that reason as well. And then we also, as a nation, started to subsidize the construction of single-family housing in suburbs, and so people took advantage of subsidized mortgages, the home mortgage interest tax credit, things of that nature. We started to subsidize home ownership. and a lot of new homes were built in the suburbs, and so a lot of people moved to the suburbs to live in the new homes. By 1999, most Americans lived in the suburbs and shopped at local malls as opposed to our original older inner cities. Snow Belt or Rust Belt cities were the first to lose lots of higher income taxpayers to the suburbs. So as these higher income taxpayers moved from the cities to the suburbs, then that meant less and less money to upkeep the infrastructure in the older cities as well as the schools. So conditions started to get worse in the older Rust Belt or Snow Belt cities. These people started to speed up their moving to the suburbs, and cities not only lost the higher income taxpayers, but also a lot of the middle class and even working class people now have grown tired of some of the Rust Belt cities such as Detroit, and folks have moved to the suburbs, and they've also moved south to the Sun Belt or the post-industrial Sun Belt cities. People like being in warm weather, so a lot of people leave the Snow Belt / Rust Belt cities because it's warmer. People like to move to the south because there's a lower cost of living. People like to move to the south because southern states usually have fewer regulations for businesses to follow. Businesses will go where there's fewer regulations to follow because they can feel they can make more money. So if businesses are making more money, that means they're growing. If businesses are growing, that means they're hiring more people. So a lot of people have left the north and continue to leave the north for the south to take advantage of cheaper housing and of new economic opportunities through new employment. A megalopolis is a vast urban area containing a number of cities and surrounding suburbs. So the most famous megalopolis in the United States is the New York, D.C., Philadelphia, even includes Boston. New York, Boston, D.C., Philadelphia megalopolis, which is connected by not only highways and freeways, but also by Amtrak. That area of the world, of the United States, is responsible for an inordinate amount of the United States economic output or GDP. In the United States, we also have edge cities, or office buildings, malls, hotels, and entertainment complexes outside of city centers. Be an example of an edge city here. I guess if when you go out, you leave downtown Montgomery and you head out towards where the AMC theaters are, you might think of that as an edge city. The notion of edge cities, or that term, came from an urban journalist by the name of Joel Garreau, who actually wrote a book called Edge Cities. Then some people say, I don't believe this, that we are in a rural rebound as people are leaving urban and suburban areas to return to rural areas to take advantage of small towns and small town life, slower pace, cheaper real estate, more space, being able to raise your family without a lot of undue negative influences, things of that nature. So some people say there's a rural rebound. I don't know if I necessarily believe it. One of the earliest sociologists to talk about the effects that urban life were having on humans was Ferdinand Tönnies, who came up with two concepts, Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft is when social organization excuse me, really dry throat today. Social organization in which people are closely tied by kinship and tradition. So in old rural pre-city areas, everyone was engaged in farming. Everyone knew their neighbors. Everything that was produced in a farm community, you actually knew who did the production. You actually knew who made each and everything that was consumed in that area. Either somebody in your family or somebody in your village who was known for being able to bake really well and make good clothing, build houses, whatever. Under Gesellschaft, people move to the urban areas, and social organization is based on people being together on individual self-interest. So in the Gesellschaft period, you don't actually know who made whatever it is that you're buying. You may not even know who you're buying it from, such as when we go to the store and we buy groceries, we may not know the cashier, and we may not even know where those groceries came from. And same thing when we buy cars or clothing or what have you. So Gemeinschaft is rural, small villages, everybody knows everybody, tradition is important. Gesellschaft is urban, big cities, people are linked more and more by money as opposed to kinship and tradition. Emil Durkheim had similar conceptualizations of city life. Under mechanical solidarity, there are social bonds based on common sentiments and shared moral values. So these would be, once again, your small rural areas that existed before cities. As cities grew, people would leave the small rural areas and mechanical solidarity and engage in organic solidarity in big cities in which social bonds are based upon specialization and interdependence. Today, there are a number of things that we consume as individuals and within our households, but for the most part, we don't make those things ourselves. We have a job, we have income from those jobs, and we use that income to go to the various stores that specialize in the things that we need. This results in an interdependence because people who know how to do one thing but need another thing use their income to buy that other thing, and the person that you bought that from use his or her income to potentially buy the things that you are involved in producing. Georg Simmel said that people who dwell in urban areas have to take on a blasé urban attitude, or tuning out of all of the stimuli within the urban area, which is a strategy for social survival. Cities have a lot of things going on within them, which can make it difficult to concentrate on what is most important to an individual. So Georg Simmel argued that city dwellers have to take on a blasé urban attitude. Robert Park and Louis Wirth were urban sociologists who were part of the Chicago School, or at the University of Chicago, the Chicago School of Sociology, and they argued that urban organization, especially late urban organization in which we kind of live now, there are commercial centers, there are ethnic communities, and there are industrial districts within cities. Commercial centers, like you have the downtown business district, where you have finance, media, what else happens downtowns? Maybe some restaurants. You have ethnic communities. Here in Montgomery, I teach on the Montgomery campus of Troy. It's pretty much just black and white, but in other big cities you'll have white ethnic communities, Little Italy, Greektown. Then you'll also have Asian ethnic communities, Chinatown. If you ever go to Chicago, there's actually two Chinatowns. The original Chinatown is on the south side of the city. The newer Chinatown is actually a Vietnamese community, which is sometimes referred to as Little Vietnam. In early cities, industrial districts were in the city centers because that's where the transportation routes were. But as cities grew and suburbanized, a lot of industrial activity has actually been moved outside of cities because the businesses want to be able to grow without having to worry about growing into existing urban areas and residential districts, who often complain about smells and sounds that come from industrial districts. Industrial districts also have begun to grow outside of cities because land is cheaper. If you need to grow, you need to buy land to build new space. And the taxes are lower. Taxes are usually much lower outside of cities as opposed to in the middle of cities. In terms of critique or evaluation of these theories, they can often overlook the effects of class, race, and gender, as cities can intensify social differences. Ferdinand Tonies and Lewis Worth saw the decline of personal ties and traditional morality from the rural villages, and so they thought that urbanization was a negative for humanity, whereas Emil Durkheim and Robert Park emphasized urbanism's positive points, like greater individual autonomy and personal choice. Growing up in a rural area, probably not a lot of choice in terms of who to date, where you're going to work, what kind of restaurants you want to eat in, how you're going to school your children. But if you get to a modern city, all of those modern cities provide more choices in each of the areas that I just named. Urban ecology is a study or link between the physical and social dimensions of cities. A lot of the research that I do look at what they're technically both urban and environmental sociology, but technically could be considered urban urban ecology. In terms of what urban ecology studies, it usually studies of what people have in common within a particular territory. Minorities are important in terms of American urban life in that cities usually are the places where you have large concentrations of minorities. As minorities are now a majority of the population in 65 of the 100 largest U.S. cities, there's been a loss of the white population in inner city areas of white families have chosen to live in the suburbs, and you also have an increase of immigration, and immigrants tend to cluster in cities because of existing ethnic enclaves, and also because cities often have a lot of resources that make it cheaper to live in them versus the suburbs. If you live in the suburbs, most suburbs you need to have a car, but if you live in a city you can take advantage of public transportation, for instance. When I say that minorities are now a majority of the population in 65 of the largest U.S. cities, all minorities in aggregation as opposed to just one minority in these places. So if you add up all the Latinos, blacks, other minorities in a metropolitan area, you add up all of them, they outnumber whites, but in all of these areas, for the most part, in 35 of the 100 largest cities, whites still make up the largest ethnicity. Robert Park and Ernest Burgess were University of Chicago school sociologists who theorized that cities existed in concentric zones. In the middle of cities, you have the central business district, which may also include businesses like banking, publishing, maybe some government offices. Around that city center was a circular zone that contained industry, factories, as well as logistics and transportation. And then that circle was surrounded by housing circle. Close into the urban center was the cheapest housing. Then further out, you had a ring of housing that was more and more expensive. People with money were moving further out who wanted bigger houses and bigger chunks of land to live on. Homer Hoyt, he's the only one within this portion of this lecture who will actually give you the full name. Homer Hoyt was actually not a sociologist. He was a land economist, but it was extremely important because he actually wrote the book that outlines how to value land as cities expanded from the urban center. And it's Homer Hoyt's writings on land economics that form the bases of decisions as to where today's malls and suburban housing tracts are constructed. So remember that name, Homer Hoyt, is extremely important. He said that cities were formed in wedge-shaped sectors as these sectors were, if you think about, what's a good example? A dartboard actually has wedge-shaped sectors on it that start at the bullseye and then expand out to the edge of the dartboard. Homeroy argued that industry forms along rail lines and then fashionable areas next to old, formerly fashionable areas. So instead of there being circles, Homeroy said that the cities form in wedges. Theorists such as Harris and Ullman argued that they're multi-centered. They're no longer just one centers within a metropolitan area in which you had businesses like finance, but actually cities have decentralized and they're multi-centers. And then Barry and Reese, in their analysis, said that actually you have to look at a particular metropolitan area and then look at the specific types of development that happened in that area. Urban political economy took Karl Marx's analysis of social conflict, those who own businesses versus those who actually work in businesses, and applied it to the city. City life is defined by people who have power, and capitalism is a key to understanding urban life, as capitalism transformed the city into real estate deals that are traded for profit, and there's a concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the few within the city or within urban capitalism. Critiques of this include the political economy model seems to better fit today's cities versus the urban ecology model, but both are limit their focus to limited historical periods, and it is unlikely that any single model of cities can account for the full range of urban diversity. So if you are an urban theorist like I am, that's why it's important that we know all of the older and current theories. Urbanization is happening in poor nations. The 2007-2008, it was determined by the United Nations that for the first time in history, most of the world's population actually now lives in urban areas. 78% of people in industrial societies live in cities, and extreme urban growth continues to occur in low-income nations, which has given rise to slums or favelas. I imagine a number of you have seen that movie Slumdog Millionaire, which is based in India. Another great movie is called City of God, and it's based in Brazil's favelas. Those are slums, and favelas are what we would call ghettos here in the United States. Slumdog Millionaire is a good movie to check out, and City of God is another good movie to check out to see how poor urbanites are living in other places in the world. Once again, ecology is the study of the interaction of living organisms and the natural environment. The natural environment is the Earth's surface and its atmosphere, including living organisms, air, water, soil, and other resources necessary to sustain life. This is important, of course, because how we treat the environment determines how the environment treats us or enables us to live within a particular local environment. If you have an interest in the environment, I also teach Society in the Environment, or SOC 3370. So maybe think about taking that class if you have environmental interests, and we'll cover environmental sociology, environment in general. We'll also include environmental justice, which is something I'll talk about in a few minutes. An ecosystem is a system composed of the interaction of all living organisms and their natural environment. It's important to think about ecosystems because if you remove something from an ecosystem that you think is not important, you may eventually find out that is extremely important. Nowadays we talk a lot about the collapse of bee colonies. If you don't know anything about bee colonies and their importance, you might think that, well, If we don't have bees, we won't have honey, so that's just one less sweetener in the world. There'll still be sugar. But in actuality, bees also do pollination, and the pollination enables ecosystems to provide a number of different flowers and trees. So bees not only provide us with honey, but also enable the growth of important food crops as well as trees. Environmental deficit is a profound and long-term harm to the natural environment caused by humanity's focus on short-term material affluence. So, your local environment has the ability to provide you with a number of good things. One being food and fresh water. But if you extract food and fresh water too quickly from your local environment may not be able to replace those resources as fast as you actually consume them, which is a bad thing, and can have the potential to have less resources and for future generations. So environmental deficit is important if we are concerned about how future humans are going to be living. The logic of growth says that more powerful technology has improved our lives and discoveries will make the future better. But a critique of that notion is that progress can lead to unexpected problems and resources on the earth are finite. There have been a number of scholars who have argued, well, that's true, but human technology has always been able to provide alternatives when we have come up against an environment's finite limits. There are even some very famous people who say, well, maybe the Earth does have finite limits, but there are other places in our galaxy that we can go to get resources. So there are the founders of Google, Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon, James Cameron, who is a famous movie producer who did the Titanic, as well as Avatar. If you remember Avatar was actually about people from Earth going to an asteroid or a new planet and extracting resources from that new planet or asteroid. James Cameron, Jeff Bezos, and the founders of Google, I forget their names, Sergey and Larry. Sergey Brin and Larry Page. They are actually starting companies who are actually looking at going to asteroids in our galaxy and mining those asteroids for resources. So there are some people who worry, most environmentalists worry about our ability to maintain our growth, human growth, and capitalistic growth on Earth. But then there are other capitalists who say, well, you may be right, maybe there are finite resources on Earth, but we will actually go to asteroids and begin to get resources from them. More pessimistic theorists say that humanity must implement policies to control growth of population, production, and the use of resources to avoid environmental collapse. But there are those of us who are more optimistic who say that long-range predictions are speculative. And as I've said before, in the past we've always been able to create technology to provide more and more food for ourselves. We actually can now desalinate ocean water to provide more and more drinking water. And there's, like I was saying before, some very smart and rich entrepreneurs are going to be using their resources to actually try to mine asteroids for the minerals that we need here on Earth. Solid waste is a problem, or is considered to be a problem as we consume more products than virtually any other nation. Well, we are actually we have more economic output and are richer than any other nation, so that's why we have more waste. That's not necessarily a bad thing. 136 million tons of our solid waste ends in landfills, and it used to be thought that eventually we would have so much waste in the United States that we would run out of landfill space, but that was a myth that has been debunked. Recycling is one way to deal with all of disposables that we have in our society, and recycling has become more and more common in the United States. And you yourself may live in a community that has a recycling program. Only about 1% of the Earth's water is suitable for drinking. Suitable water is also called potable, P-O-T-A-B-L-E, potable water. Water pollution is an issue as the U.S. rivers and streams absorb hundreds of millions of toxic waste a year. A big problem in the United States is fertilizer and pesticides that we use in agriculture often ends up in our water. Air pollution is a problem as well. More people die in the world from air pollution than any other problem. Not here in the United States necessarily, but throughout the world, air pollution kills more people than any other problem. But air quality has improved in the rich countries in the world, and eventually technology will enable the poorer countries to improve their air quality as well. When we talk about issues in the environment, we sometimes talk about the rainforests, which are regions of dense forestation, most of which circles the globe near the equator. Rainforests are important because they provide biodiversity. Rainforests provide the world with a lot of the world's oxygen, but the rainforest is threatened because the number of people who live in countries with rainforests destroy rainforests in order to plant crops or to provide grazing for cattle. Global warming is another big environmental issue that people are talking about throughout the world, which is a rise in the Earth's average temperature caused by an increasing concentration of carbon dioxide and other gases in the atmosphere that trap the sun's heat, don't allow it to dissipate. So as the Earth gets warmer and warmer, there are changes to the world's weather, makes it more and more difficult to live in certain places, and also causes sea level rise as the warming temperature causes the ice at the Arctic and Antarctic regions of the world to melt, and coastal regions of the world are starting to see more and more flooding. To talk more specifically about sociology, within environmental sociology there's something called environmental justice, which is a response to environmental racism, which is a pattern in which environmental hazards seem to be greatest for poor people and people of color throughout, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. Robert Bullard is a sociologist who is sociology's father of the environmental justice movement. He currently teaches at Texas Southern University and actually grew up in Elba, Alabama. His most famous book is Dumping in Dixie, in which he talks about how in southern United States there seems to be more of a problem in terms of poor communities and communities of color living near environmental hazards, such as landfills, chemical corporations, any type of business activity that results in pollution. And if you're interested, you can take a look at the video, The Genesis of Environmental Justice, at the YouTube address there at the bottom. And then nowadays we talk a lot about ecological sustainability and trying to create an ecologically sustainable culture, which is a way of life that meets the needs of the current generation without threatening the environmental legacy of future generations. So like I was saying before, the Earth has the ability to provide a certain level of resources that humanity needs to live. But if we usurp those resources faster than the Earth is able to replace those resources, or if we create waste faster than the Earth is able to absorb those wastes, we're then living in an unsustainable society, and we threaten the quality of life of future generations. So the sustainable culture, ecologically sustainable culture, will be a culture in which we utilize the Earth's resources at a pace that is lower than the Earth can replace those resources, and we create waste slower than the pace of the Earth's ability to absorb those wastes. Once again, if you have any questions about this lecture, please email me or give me a call. I look forward to speaking with you or responding to your questions that you have. Thank you.